Hello, I hope people are having a good week and they had a good week and weekend last week. Uh, we are moving into fireworks season. There's a lot of firefighters that are working as hard as they can to bring the fires in Utah and Colorado under control. So that means that a lot of families aren't going to be able to blow stuff up in a controlled manner. In our neighborhood, there are a couple families that every year until this year have gone really far out and their displays are better than some of the city displays that I've seen. Really very cool stuff. But sadly, this time of year, with everything being so dry, there's a lot of communities that can't do that. So I hope you have other ways that you can celebrate the 4th of July, if you do. This week, we are going to be talking about the color and tile and texture tiles. I want to look at that. We did have something turned in that we can look at. And there's the person who did that. There's some really good stuff to look at. Want to talk about it a little bit more and just reiterate some of the things, some of the parameters for that assignment. Now, it's not a really huge assignment, and that's something to be mindful of, but it is really important because this is what's going to prepare you for the final assignment for the excuse me, for the final thing that you're going to be doing on your carving. And I should have everything finished graded before the holiday, and that'll give you over a month to redo stuff if you need to rework on anything. Now, before we get into that, we did have several more of the PowerPoints, and I wanted to watch each one of those with everybody, and then I'll go through and talk about um, what they did on each of these. I'm going to do a screen share, and we're going to watch that. I'm sorry. All right, let's see. Here we go. Maybe. Now, I gotta warn you, my internet has been a little wonky. So if we lose stuff, don't worry about it too much. It'll come right back, hopefully in a minute or so, or less than a minute. All right, so this is Damien Hirst by Samuel. So we're going to watch the whole thing and then we'll talk about it.
So for my presentation on this PowerPoint, I decided to do a focus on Damien Hirst and to talk about a lot of his artworks. So a background on Damien Hirst is that he was born June 7th, 1965, and is a British artist and art collector who became one of the leading figures of the young British art movements during the 1990s. Hirst has shown an early interest in the human anatomy, and as a teenager, he would regularly visit the anatomy department in Leeds Medical School to sketch. He moved to London in the early 1980s and later earned a bachelor's in fine arts from Goldsmiths College from 1986 to 1989. So, what makes his artworks very special? Well, in a way that makes it very special is that he can take any animal that he decided or is deceased to give them new life. So he uses not only random mammals, but also he's used butterflies and human skulls. He manages to manipulate these deceased, lifeless bodies in a way to make them to be put in a type of pattern or a type of state of stasis as though they were not dead. In a way, he forces the viewers to accept the reality of mortality and its illusion. And there are some things that give meaning to the human soul as a rebirth. So let's talk about how the transformation process begins with a lot of his art pieces. So the way that he usually starts off with is first starting to find the animal from his connected sources, which are farms or suppliers. A lot of these animals have already been deceased, so he lets them die naturally without causing them any pain. Then he usually gets a frame glass box with steel and is filled with formaldehyde solution. While they are being preserved in this substance, he tries to put them in random positions and facial expressions as well, or puts inanimate objects with these animals to complete his artwork. So here are some great examples, in my opinion, that show the type of artwork that he tries to put into. So the middle one, which is a very famous one of his sharks, has shown it being in like as though it was like an attacking position when you find them in the wild, but it's like frozen in time in a type of stasis, and how it's not natural to be split between three sections. Then on the other side, we have the black lamb and sheep, which as though as was like in the middle of like walking or like a type of emotion, but what makes it pretty remarkable is like the golden horns that is not natural in the animal kingdom. And then probably the best one I've saved for last was the fish tank. It does look as though it was like an aquarium, and you would think that these fish are probably swimming randomly as like, you know, you find in aquariums, but they're not. They're in the formaldehyde in a state of emotion, but also as an example, Damien Hirst has put them in with random objects, like as you can tell, like a type of medical bed with equipment inside. Spatial relationship is the key that I find in a lot of Damien Hirst's artwork. For when it comes to the artwork that Damien has put into, where they are put in a lot of art galleries and museums, is that most of the artworks in these areas are put into large rooms that or spaces that are meant to stick out with these colorized formaldehyde that are inside with the animal, which it forces the viewers to draw their eyes to. And because, as you can tell in these photos, is that they don't have too much of a feature where like other art pieces are surrounding them, because it would distract them from the main point of view of his artwork, which I find very fascinating of like how it in a way you may think it doesn't fill up the room, but it does, because these things are popping out and draws the human eye to. And because of like the type of emotions that these things are set in their frozen set of like time or space that they're in, it really sticks out to the person who is trying to take a look at these figures and art pieces. Though many of his artworks have very unsettling feelings to them, they can be an extreme that animals that are dead, sliced, or positioned in a way that somehow is uncomfortable to the viewer. But that's the point of why Damien Hirst forces the viewer to understand the true mortality of life, and something that can't be prevented, and something that's not in our control, especially life or even death. We should try to strive to push forward with our own future, which is one of the foundations of Damien Hirst's message in these beautiful art pieces. My favorite art piece of all is the Golden Calf, made in 2008. Well, I would say this is going to be the closest description that you can find biblically accurate to what you find in the book of Exodus and the Holy Bible, is the iconic golden calf. I like how the only thing that is not golden or covered is the main body, but the hooves and the horns and the Egyptian crown or symbol is all golden, which, if you want to say to as a close description something biblically historical, you think it would all be covered in gold. I think that's the point of why it's not covered. We tend to, as human beings, switch things from illusions that have no benefit to our lives, and things that we see divine in our lives are also false idols that will never bring us wisdom or happiness. Because as you can see, that this animal that, or this little calf that may seem very important to so many ideology in the world is nothing but a false hope. And that wraps up my presentation on Damien Hirst's artwork. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And thank you very much for your time.
I really like this. I want to double check something right here. These all need to be, and I'll just say this because I noticed it last, they all need to be in alphabetical order. So um, this person just needs to, I don't want you guys to have to redo the video. And I'm putting this out first because this is something that almost everybody does. They all need to be in alphabetical order. They all need to have the accessed on date. And all of these do have the accessed on date. So that is excellent. That's really, really good. But they are out of alphabetical order. And so instead of redoing the video, I don't want anybody to have to redo the video. What you'll need to do is, if you're one of the people that have done this, just put them in alphabetical order in a separate document, and then add that document to your submission. And you can do that by going to the, um, what's it called? The commentary on the assignment, and you can just add it there. Or you can, and then email me after you do that, or you can just resubmit with the written file with these in alphabetical order, plus your file with the video. Samuel focused on a couple things. Like, I really liked when he was talking about how these displays are curated. They're curated so that the only work is the Damien Hirst stuff. Everything else is out. There's no, if this is in a gallery or a museum, he said that a lot of these shows have nothing but Damien Hirst work, which is really nice. And Samuel talked about how, the walls are blank, and it forces people to deal only with Damien Hirst's work. So I thought that was a really good observation. And then talking about what are some of the themes, what are the major themes that tie all of this work together, and then going at length about what's the meaning to this, what it could mean, how many people does that meaning impact, and everything. So I thought this was really well done, uh, very, very nicely done. So excellent work, Samuel. And this is 7 minutes 25 seconds. The cutoff for uh, an F is 10 minutes, and you went way under 10 minutes. So excellent work. I think I told you guys it is kind of a joke. I have had people go over 10 minutes. I don't want anybody to, but um, one like the second year I was teaching, so this is quite several years ago. Um, this class, somebody did a report that was like 33 minutes long, and it was just, oh man. So Samuel, excellent work putting this together. Very nicely done. All right, let's go to another one now. This is Ella's, and it's Sandy Skoglund. All right, here we go.
Hello. I decided to do my PowerPoint presentation on Sandy Scotland, and this is one of her pieces that I chose to put on the front page. Sandy Scotland has significant meaning behind her work. The thought and effort that goes into her pieces is so meaningful to me, and that's one of the reasons why I chose to pick her during my research. In this article that I found, it talks about how her sculptures are playful, uncanny, and unforgettable, and I totally agree with that. It also talks about how this is the way that her works became the most recognizable in the late 20th century of stage photography. This is different from me because of our styles of art and how we communicate through art, I would say. In another paragraph of this article, it mentions how her work hasn't really ever been about executing a preconceived image, and the execution from her work has emerged from an unexpected process that she has perfected over her years of doing sculpture. She developed a skill of making her sculptures the best they can be, which is through repetition. She paid really close attention to certain artists that have similar execution skills of her own, which I think is really cool and kind of what we're learning about in class. Um, she has a certain way of using repetition that doesn't use abstractions, and super inspiring to me. Her work is displayed in the Imaginary Worlds of Photography in Italy. It celebrates her career and shows significant, remarkable photographs and really emphasizes how her detailed work was. It talks about how like combining sculptural methods with a photographic aesthetic that is related to commercial advertising. She has the ability to make the viewer think about what is going on in the photo, which, yes, I definitely agree with that, and like what the sculpture's about. It also explains how she explored a mix of photography, conceptual art, and installation. She built a wide variety of materials, mostly using paper mache, and she uses it to make food and furniture in her imaginary rooms that she creates. In the 80s, her pictures became internationally unrecognizable. Um, a famous piece that became particularly famous in the 80s is called Radioactive Cats, and it shows an elderly couple in a gray kitchen that is overrun by green cats. And this piece that is shown is a different type of work that she does, and I think it's really interesting to look at. She puts a lot of thought and effort into each sculpture and photograph that she does, and I think that it shows with her picking the background over here and like the plate and the stripes of the cookies. It's really interesting. Some of her history and schooling, some of her personal history. She was born in Massachusetts in 1946, and her family always moved around a ton because of her working father. And she lived in New England, and she and her family moved to California. This is when she graduated high school. She studied art all over the place, studio art and art history at Smith College. And then, yes, she went to France, which I think that like it influenced her work greatly because of all the schooling and personal history and trials she went throughout her life. And yeah, she got her master's degree really quick and wasted no time in schooling, which I think is very inspiring to me. This article that this slide is on, or citation is on, is it shows a lot of her pieces and what they're called and how they were made. A piece mentioned in the article is called The Wedding. It was made in 1994. And it looks like a couple in a room surrounded by lotus flowers and a wedding cake behind them. And I think it's super interesting because most of the slides, not the slides, most of her sculptures, they can be translated differently from someone else. Like it couldn't look like that if someone else were to look like that, if that makes sense. Yeah, in this picture, it looks like there's germs everywhere, and yes, that's what it's called. Germs are everywhere. And yeah, I thought that it meant that there are certain things that we'll never know that are always around us, which is interesting to think about. And it's so cool to me that that can be like communicated through art, which is another reason why I chose her and how inspiring she is. So yeah, that's all. Here are my sources and the articles. This particular piece on here is called Peas on a Plate. And again, like the thought, the polka dots and the plate and the bread and the peas. It's really interesting. So yeah.
All right, I this is another one that I thought is really good. Oh, I mislabeled this. It is by Ella Carrillo, and I am sorry about that. I'm gonna go back and fix this right now. This, I'm sorry that I mislabeled that. I am making that change right now, and so uh, when you guys see this on our playlist, it'll be proper. It'll be correct. I like how Ella goes through and talks about each of these different articles that they found, and it's a very different style than the previous one that we just finished watching. And but it's still, I'm liking this. I'm liking what's going on. I think that it was well done. So, this, sorry, I'm trying to fix something else really quick here. Sorry about that. I get back to what I'm doing in just a second here. Okay, there we go. So you're back to talking about this. And I liked the fact that they showed several different images. Like this is something that's interesting to me because most people that do a report on Sandy Skoglund don't talk about Sandy's other photography. And this is something that Ella did. So I really like that. Nicely done. Um, the only issue with this one that will need to be changed for more points is right here, the sources. All the sources need to be in MLA format, like we talked about in the class. They must be in that correct format and then alphabetically arranged, and each with the access on date at the end. So not the URLs. So this person will need to go back through, make that document with the correct citations in the correct format in alphabetical order with the um, uh, what's it called? with the accessed on date at the end, like I said, and they can put that into a separate document and then resubmit with the video and that, and then they'll get full points. So I really liked how this was presented, nicely done, and they showed some images that are not common images for Sandy Scoglin's work. So well done. All right, now we're going to watch another one. This is a little bit shorter, 532, and this is still, so that one we just watched was almost 7 minutes, and this one is 5.5 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and watch this one, and we'll talk about it at the end. But both the ones we've seen have been really good.
Ana Mendietta's work is often difficult to describe just because it is so untraditional and unique. Most artists create objects that we can continually visit and look at, but Mendieta created experiences that often disappeared almost as soon as they were made. Her work feels mysterious, spiritual, and incredibly emotional. While her life story greatly inspired and guided her art, I want this presentation to focus on the whimsy of her work and why it continues to affect people decades later. While this assignment is not meant to be a biography, I do think it's crucial to acknowledge a few experiences that molded her. These moments were significant and provide a great insight into her work and why she turned to art in the first place. Mendieta was sent from Cuba to the United States as a child. She was separated from her family and spent years feeling disconnected from her homeland. This intense yearning for connection brings a whole new meaning to her work. She was never just making pretty art about dirt and trees. She was searching for somewhere to belong. Conrad James argues that understanding who Mendieta was as a person makes the artwork that much richer, and I completely agree. Once you know about her displacement, her repeated return to the earth feels less symbolic and more deeply personal. This is some of the work that she is probably the most famous for. It's called the Silhouette series. And instead of painting landscapes, she placed her own body into them. Sometimes she carved a silhouette into the dirt. Sometimes she filled it with flowers, sometimes leaves, fire, or even blood red pigment. What really fascinates me is that the body is often absent. We don't actually see Anna, we see the place where she was. It almost feels like the earth is remembering her. I love that these pieces were not meant to last. The rain washes them away, wind erases them. They existed only for a short moment, almost like memories. So, not all of Mendieta's work is peaceful. Some of it is intentionally difficult to look at. She recreated scenes of violence against women to force viewers to confront things that society often ignored. I really appreciate that she wasn't interested in making comfortable art. Daniel Tan writes that her performances deal with violence, spirituality, death, and rebirth all at the same time. Even in these darker works, I don't think she is celebrating the suffering. I think she's asking us not to look away from it. This here is probably my very favorite part of her work. She treats natural materials almost like characters instead of objects. Fire isn't just fire, it becomes life and death. Flowers become tenderness, mud often becomes rebirth. Emily Labarge describes her work as emotional, and I think that is the exact right word. That and magical. Looking at these images makes me feel like I'm reading an old myth or even witnessing some forgotten ceremony. This is where the whimsy comes in for me, and that's what makes her work so important. It's not whimsical in a playful or fairy tale sense, but magical in the sense that nature suddenly feels sacred again. So, this is something that really surprised me while I was researching her. Despite how influential she's been, Catherine Spencer has done lots of research and she discusses how Mendieta's work is still missing from so many museums that claim to celebrate diversity. It's really ironic because her work has inspired generations of artists, and yet in so many museums and other places of art, her work is not there. And I think that her absence says just as much about the art world as her presence does. So this is the slide that feels the most personal because these are my two very favorite pieces of hers. The piece on the left is called Creek, and the piece on the right is actually untitled. So the longer I sit with these pieces, the more entranced I feel. There's something about the foggy and a little bit mystical setting on her camera. They feel unfocused, a little unclear. It feels like it's an entirely different world, almost a fantasy world. And I think that these qualities show exactly how she feels about nature and why she wants to become part of it and how it becomes her own sacred space, how it becomes a place different from the world she is used to, a place where that she can belong. And I think part of this is achieved because her work isn't just trying to impress us technically, even though it's very beautifully composed. I feel like it's trying to make us feel connected to something older than ourselves. Her art reminds me that people are not separate from nature, we're part of it. And somehow she communicates that with little more than dirt, leaves, fire, and the outline of a human body.
That was a really, really good one. I really like how personal um Hannah made this. That was really interested, and it sounded to me like Hannah had practiced a bit because they were very, very comfortable talking about this artist. And I loved how they said, yeah, these are the two pieces that I really sat with and that resonated with me, and talked about the importance of Anna Mendieta. And I I love how they just picked out the highlights of Anna's bio because those are the points that Hannah felt helped us to understand what Anna was doing with their artwork. So really nicely done. And I have this on this page too because I want you to notice they did a really good job. All of these are in MLA format, and all of them are in alphabetical order. Each of them have the access to on date at the end. So excellent work on the bibliography. Like I said, this is the thing that I go to because this is the thing that people have to redo the most often. So this was really, really well done. Excellent work. All right, and now we are going to the fourth one. So this will be the last one that we talk about today. And there's a couple things. What one thing that well, there's a couple things that have been impressing me with all of these. You guys really understand what the assignment is about, and you guys are doing an excellent, excellent job. And it is very impressive to me that everybody's keeping within the time frame. I love that. I have had classes where half the people turn in stuff that's only 3 minutes long, and the minimum is 5 minutes. And so they lose a bunch of points because it's not long enough. You guys are also really connecting with these artists, and you're talking about them from a place of real solid understanding and appreciation. So that is very cool to see. So thank you. All right, here we go. We're going to watch this one. Let's see. All right, here we go.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the environmental artist Andy Goldsworthy. Instead,
Now I'm going to say this. I don't know for sure, but um, I am thinking that this is by or the voice that we have is an AI. I think that that's what it is, and I really appreciate that. That does involve a little bit of extra work, so kudos to this person. So sorry for interrupting. I'm going to start over again.
today I'm going to talk about the environmental artist Andy Goldsworthy. Instead of creating sculptures from traditional materials like bronze or marble, Goldsworthy works directly with nature using leaves, stones, ice, branches, mud, and other natural materials he finds around him. What makes him remarkable is that he doesn't try to control.
Now I'm just gonna interrupt one more time. I don't know if this is an AI voice or not. Whoever's voice it is, if this is Aaron's voice, I this is a good voice to have this. It makes it sound very interesting. It's a good narrative voice.
Is that he doesn't try to control nature. Instead, he collaborates with it, allowing weather, time, and the environment to become part of the artwork itself. His work completely changed the way I think about sculpture and what art can be. Andy Goldsworthy was born in England in 1956 and grew up working on farms, where he developed an appreciation for the changing patterns of nature. Rather than bringing materials into a studio, he usually creates his sculptures outdoors, using whatever he finds nearby. Many of his works only exist for a few hours before they melt, collapse, or wash away. Because of this, photography becomes an essential part of his artistic process. The photographs preserve the artwork after nature has transformed it. One of the ideas I found most interesting while researching Goldsworthy is that he doesn't treat nature like raw material waiting to be shaped. Instead, he treats it like a creative partner. Wind, rain, sunlight, freezing temperatures, and gravity all influence his work. If a sculpture collapses, he often rebuilds it or simply accepts that outcome. Unlike many artists who strive for complete control, Goldsworthy embraces unpredictability. That philosophy makes every piece unique because it can never be recreated exactly the same way again. Another theme that appears throughout Goldsworthy's work is impermanence. Many of his sculptures disappear naturally after they are completed. Ice melts, leaves blow away, and rivers carry sculptures downstream. Rather than seeing this as failure, Goldsworthy believes the artwork includes these changes. This challenged the way I usually think about art because most artwork is meant to last forever. Goldsworthy shows that something can still be meaningful even if it only exists for a short time. Watching the documentary Rivers and Tides helped me understand Goldsworthy much more than simply reading about him. Seeing him work showed how much patience and persistence his sculptures require. Sometimes he spends hours building something that falls apart just before it's finished. Instead of becoming frustrated, he studies what happened and tries again. I found this inspiring because it shows that failure is simply part of the creative process. It reminded me that art isn't always about producing a perfect final object. One one of the scholarly articles I read described Goldsworthy's approach as thinking through making. Instead of beginning with a rigid plan, he allows the materials themselves to influence the direction of the artwork. This completely changed how I viewed his sculptures. I realized he isn't forcing his ideas onto nature. Instead, he works alongside the environment and adapts as conditions change. That relationship between artist and landscape is one of the reasons his work feels so authentic. One thing I appreciated most about researching Andy Goldsworthy is how differently he approaches creativity. As someone studying art and design, I'm used to thinking about planning, precision, and permanence. Goldsworthy reminded me that creativity can also come from observation, flexibility, and accepting change. He finds beauty in ordinary things that many people overlook. And I think that's something every artist can learn from. His work encourages people to slow down and appreciate the natural world in a new way. Andy Goldsworthy has become one of the most influential environmental artists because he completely changes the relationship between artist, artwork, and nature. His sculptures remind us that beauty doesn't have to last forever to have meaning. Through patience, observation, and collaboration with the natural world, he creates experiences that are just as important as the finished sculpture itself. I think his work encourages all of us to pay closer attention to the environment around us. Here's my works cited page. Wow, it looks pretty good, right? Ha 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 ha. Anyways, thanks for watching, y'all. Have a wonderful evening and stay blessed.
That was really a good one too. I think this is looking really pretty good as a works cited page, and I'm responding to this first because I said it looks pretty good, doesn't it? This is great, except this last one should be at the beginning. And so for the last couple of points, um, Aaron just sent a document with this last one up here. Everything else is looking really good because you have all the accessed on stuff there. That looks great. So it just needs to be alphabetical. These four are perfect. This one needs to be the very first. I like the voice on this. Their narrative voice is really good. And I really like there's a good selection of different ones that were picked. Some of these I haven't seen, and I like it when we're able, when putting together some of these. A lot of the times, whenever we do research on an artist, we see the same things generally over and over again. And one thing I like about what Aaron did is finding images that are not the most common images, for the sculpture. And I liked some of the things they brought up, returning to the idea of impermanence and that sometimes falling apart and failure is part of the creative process. I think those are things that really bring Andy Goldsworthy's work out. It makes his work stand out from other people just because of his process, accepting that. And one of the things that he did was a series of photos where right when it started raining, he would go and lay down. And when the rain was done, he would get up and then take a photo of the silhouette. And he also found people that would help him do that. So he could do several different photos, and which I thought was really interesting because, of course, within 15 minutes after the rain, you're not going to see that anymore. It disappears almost immediately. So I thought that was very interesting. And some of them are very dramatic. So I really like Aaron did a beautiful job picking out things that are really good examples of what Andy Goldsworthy did. And again, just enough of a bio so we kind of get an idea of where Andy Goldsworthy's coming from. So that was really good too. And I love again the very personal connection that Aaron found with this artist. So again, excellent work. Nicely done. So all of those, again, all of those were really well done. And a couple of them just need that work on the last page, excuse me, on a citation page. Again, I don't want you to redo the video. Just do a document with the citations correctly cited and in alphabetical order and turn that in. And remember that Canvas resets or overwrites every previous submission with whatever the most current one is. So when you do submit that, also resubmit at the same time with the video file that you've done. And it will take care of that. All right. So those are all excellent. Now what a big thing that I want to talk about today as well is the color and tile module. I mentioned it last week, but we did not talk about it. So I want to talk about that. And it looks like we have some more biomorphic carvings that were done, like 2 more. But I think that we talked about the color tiles. That will use up our time. And so next week, after the holiday weekend, I will go back and revisit the biomorphic abstraction carving. And then I will also use that time to talk a little bit about um, the uh, conceptual art, the contemporary processes. So once again, great job on these PowerPoints. So it looks like we still have several people that need to turn theirs. If you see something that you like, go ahead and pick it out and start working on your uh, peer review. And sometimes it's easier to do that and then do your own. And when you do your own, remember, pretend it's the first time you've seen it and then it's not yours. When you do that, go through this whole module again, look at it all again. And one of the things to be mindful of is the tools of artistic critique. You know, there are 4 tools: discuss, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. And if you just go through that while you're looking at the artwork, whether it's yours or somebody else's, it's usually pretty easy to get to the 3 minutes minimum. And what I would recommend is talk about the artwork with somebody else, see about how long that is when you don't factor in their responses to you. And then after you do that, go ahead and start recording it. And again, you are just recording with a screenshot of the artwork. You don't have to show yourself. So for this module, texture and light, um, what we are specifically talking about is, excuse me, how important color, visual texture, and physical texture are to the things that we experience. Now, each of these 3 videos are really important. Um, and I will share this in just a second. It's going through an ad. So, all right. I'm not going to show these videos to you because, again, YouTube will ding the video. So I'm just going to show you. Let's see, this is a little bit of a fast overview of this first video, and then I want to show you these other 3. These are, and I want you to watch these whole videos. So this is how we usually see these Roman and Greek sculptures out of marble. And then this is what they originally looked like. And the reason why we know that's what they look like is because there are microscopic remnants of pigment left over. And a lot of people are kind of surprised by this, that they were originally painted realistically like this. And there are some really beautiful examples of these uh, sculptures painted and what are restored to what they may have looked like originally. And I am trying to find. Okay, I'm not having a lot of luck finding some other examples on this video, so I will show you another one. But one of the reasons why we are so used to seeing the Greek and Roman sculptures as white, and we think of them as white marble. Well, white marble was picked and it was prized because not because it was pure or the most beautiful necessarily, but it was picked that way because that made the best backdrop for the painting. And the painting was absolutely vital. Oh, I'm sorry, I completely messed this up. I didn't show you guys. This is the first thing, and then this is what it looks like painted. And one of the reasons why white marble was so prized was because it made such a beautiful canvas for the person painting the sculpture. Now, here's another one. This was a 7-minute documentary about this whole process. Now, this is when we go into a museum that has, or a gallery that has these Greek and Roman sculptures, this is what we're seeing all the time. And one of the reasons is during the Renaissance, and it happened other times, but during the Renaissance, there were families that were making a lot of money switching from military economy to a trade economy. And I mean, by a lot, I mean a lot, a lot. And it became fashionable to dig up, to have shipped Greek sculptures, and dig up Roman sculptures that had been in essentially landfills and dumps. When people found these, a lot of the paint was bubbling and rotting and just super, super nasty. Imagine these were festering in mud for 1,000 years. The paint was looking disgusting. And so before they were delivered to the families who bought them, the workers who collected these and the workshops that found these for the families, they would scrape off all the paint and they would brush off the paint. They would clean it all off. And so a lot of the Renaissance artists, even, they had access to these beautiful sculptures. They had no idea that they were ever painted because by the time they saw them, the paint had been all scraped and brushed and cleaned off. Well, you fast forward a couple hundred years during the beginning of the Enlightenment, you get a number of art historians talking about this, and they reference the purity of the white marble as being the peak of artistic expression, and that pure white is the most beautiful. And they're basing this whole idea of what the peak of art expression should be on their false understanding of Roman and Greek ideals of artistic expression after all the paint that the Romans and Greeks had put on had been cleaned off. So I wanted to show you, let's see a couple of these. This is a really beautiful sculpture. And here, I like this one because you can kind of see the remnants of some of the paint on it still. Now, let's see if we can find, I think it was a pretty good, it wasn't a completely spurious assumption that the sculptures were plain because they did see the red and white figure vases of ancient Greece where there wasn't an awful lot of color applied. But even there's some speculation about that because maybe they painted after the vases were fired. I there's a couple people that believe that. I don't necessarily believe so, but one of the reasons why you get the red and white figure vases the way they are is because that was the style. It was important that it was just red. Okay, so we're looking at different things. These are portraits that were done of people restored, so you can see that uh, they are painted to be rather factual, and I believe this may be Severius Septimius, the first Black African Roman emperor. But I'm trying to fast forward to show you. Okay, here's a really good example of what some of the painting may have looked like, where the hair is painted, a lot of the decorative work on the armor and the robes are painted. And there's some others that are really beautiful, like delicate handwork that's painted. And a lot of these, and you can see that there are some full painting done with even skin being painted, different things like that. one of the reasons why a lot of this isn't painted all the way is because the people working on it, they want to make sure, on some of these historical reproductions, they want to make sure of what they know was painted. And let's see, you can see some of these have a lot of color on them. Some of them have a little bit less. Trying to find, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find, oh, I can't find that. Yeah, I can see the little, you can see the little, okay, here we go. So this is some of the paint work. The reason why they know the colors, they're not 100% sure about the colors, but they are pretty sure because they know the remnants of the minerals and pigments that are in there. So, and that is, going to be 99% accurate to what the colors were. Because they can, using a microscope, they can retrieve samples of the original pigment just in the porosity of the stone. Even if it's 3,000 years old, they're still able to retrieve some of that. So they have a pretty good idea of what it looks like. But you can see it's pretty vibrant. And you go from this white marble, the original lion probably had lighter, buff around here, darker for the mane, maybe. Maybe the inside of the ears were pink. So lots of stuff going on. And if that's true, I wonder what colors are on this pediment as well. Maybe that was painted. So. And then you can see there are some, uh, the portraits were painted. And one thing I don't know how accurate the skin tone is, or, maybe even the hair. And the reason I say that is that a lot of these public officials, they would have had to been working out for the last 20 years of their lives to have the physique that they do in a lot of these portraiture sculptures. So one of the things I'm thinking about is maybe they commissioned the sculptor to get the face mostly right, maybe balance that out a little bit more. Maybe they want the eyebrows to be a little bit more model, model spokesmodel like. And some of these uh, figures, the bodies, in the literature from the time describing these government uh, figures, the bodies that you see in the sculptures are what more probably representative of what they were hoping they were looking like rather than what they did look like. And then this third video. So definitely do watch these videos. And one of my favorite companies that do this is Smart History does a really good job at looking at everything with with a critical or intentful eye. Remember, in our class, critical means with intent and with purpose, and they're very good at applying Feldman's model of artistic critique to everything they do. So I really like a lot of their videos. But they're talking about how much the ancient world loved color, with these mosaics. You get some photorealistic looking stuff with the mosaics. And then we look at this goes over some of the areas of the world that have sculptures. And then this is some of these bronzes and stone sculptures, stone carvings of gladiators, for example, and warriors done using evidence of the pigment that is still in the porosity of the surface of the stone. They have an idea, or in the pigment that is attached to the bronze, even. They have an idea of what these figures may have originally looked like. You look at something like this with all these figures, and you can tell, so much color. It's super bright. This is a restoration based on what the pigments look like before they were oxidized and weathered. So, pretty impressive. And of course, this is showing what the sculpture looks like now when everything's been cleaned off. And I love this because we kind of see this is what uh, the color looks like if it's restored, again, because of the remnants of the actual pigments in the stone. And they say, well, we're not like 100% convinced this is what it exactly, or we don't 100% believe that this is exactly what it looked like, but this is a pretty good idea of what it looked like. And what they're doing, they're making educated guesses from reverse engineering the pigments that were found, plus also seeing what colors are used in contemporary mosaics and contemporary frescoes as well, because some of the frescoes do survive, particularly in areas that were covered by ash, like around Pompeii. And there were a number of other islands where you do have houses that were completely inundated with volcanic ash. So they do know what the actual colors of some of these frescoes were. So it's probably a pretty good representation of what it looked like. But I mean, it's a very different from this kind of white marble. Right? And I hope you can see why they would prize white marble, because they're using a lot of really delicate painting, to try to make these figures look like human beings. And what one of the things that it talks about in this particular um, video is that, well, a lot of the times when we see these, the head area is attached later on. And so a family may commission uh, the head to look exactly like their loved one, but then you can order from a catalog the kind of body, what the clothing, the colors of the clothing and stuff like that. So you could have, if you're doing this as a funerary tribute to the matron, the matriarch of the home, or the owner of the business, because yes, at this time, women were successful business personnel, and they did own businesses. Um, they also practiced both polygamy and polyandry, and we can talk about that at some other time. But you do have very successful and wealthy women. So maybe their family, or maybe the woman herself, commissioned a particular outfit and sculpture. I want to be wearing this for my funerary sculpture. So person would start on that, and they would ship it out and have it in storage for the family until the sad day when the matriarch did pass away. And then as she's getting close to the end of her life, maybe she's thinking, okay, let's go ahead and commission the head. So the body may take a year to finish, and they'll have that done, shipped out and stored for a few years before the person passes away. And then they'll hire maybe even a local craftsperson to sculpt the head separately. And then when they do the final touch up on the paint, they'll just match the pigments and everything, so it looks all consistent. But yeah, things like that did happen, and it may be that the entire body was done with just the facial features left unfinished, and when it was shipped out to the family, a local sculptor would finish the face. I just think that this is absolutely beautiful. And then we look at the what it looks like now with all the pigment worn away, what it looked like then. It's pretty amazing what they would do. I think these are bright and brilliant. This is a Sphinx that was done as part of a necropolis display. Necropolis is like a really, it's an incredibly beautiful cemetery type of thing. It's called a necropolis because with all the stonework that was done to celebrate the people who had passed away, it looks almost like a city. And necropolis means city of the dead. When we look at this is a young man and uh, maybe a younger sibling, or younger sister who also passed away. And looking at this, you can still kind of tell that there are remnants of color. And this, you can see where some of the painting was. And that gives them an indication of how decorative this really was, in addition to, yeah, they do find remnants of the pigment. But I just think that this is so amazing. And this looks so incredible, especially the leggings and the armwear. and then you compare it to this. This is absolutely beautiful. We can see all the anatomy, but it makes a lot more sense. You see something like this around the ankle that is not anatomically correct. You see something like this around the wrist. It is obvious that they were wearing armor or clothing, and then this it really makes it come alive. I think that is just amazing. Anyway, enough of that. But the reason why I went through all that is just to give you a little bit of a context that texture and color, visual texture and color are things that have been in sculpture for ages, ages and ages. And so, and I want you to go through when you look at these texture and light, look at how these different artists address these different things. And several of you have already done this and done the write-up for it, which has been really good. Some of the things that I think are fascinating, like Lee Bonnecue, she'll use leather and different kinds of livestock skin to do her things, and it just makes the texture, it makes it really, really fascinating. And one of my favorites, of course, is El Anatsui, where he'll do these beautiful large works that are just monumental in nature, and they look like huge tapestries. But this is all their beer cans and bottle caps. It's garbage. And he got his start by he was walking just out in Nowheresville, away from town. He was just walking to clear his head when he came across a big bag of discarded bottle caps. And he thought, I bet I could do something with this. And in his workshops in Ghana, he will have volunteers and paid workers create these elements so that he can put them together in these huge tapestries. And he has single-handedly turned around the economies of several towns in Ghana because of the work that he does. I just think and it's out of other people's garbage. I think he's amazing. And all of these artists are picked because they each have something really amazing. So this is a 6 paragraph. I say the first 5, 1 paragraph for each of the artists in that list. And the 6 is be articulate about the one artist that you saw that really impressed you the most. And the quiz, again, it's always open book. Now, for this, I want you to go on a senses journey where you are just walking around paying it, and I describe what this is, where you're paying really close attention to the textures that you see. The small pebbles, grass, dry streaks, etc. I have you list a dozen different unique textures in the quiz. You cannot use any of the ones that I mentioned to get you going, but if you have a hard time, it may be worthwhile to write down a couple and then do the rest of the quiz and then come back to that question so you can get the rest of them. But each of these websites, they have color wheel. I'm waiting for this one to load so I can show it to you. They have different color wheel setups, and they're all designed to be used by designers. And all of you guys have an expertise with illustration design already, so you know how to use these tools. And if you find a better one, go ahead and use a better one. What I liked about these is you can take like this one. This is the PixArt color wheel. You could go over here and pick out what kind of color scheme you want to use. There's easily a half dozen of them. And then you can use your base color and find out what the complementary color is, and to do the intensity as well as the chroma. And then we can also do, okay, here's complementary. Let's look at what monochromatic is. This is where you're dealing with colors around it. Analogous are things on either side. It comes closer together as you move in towards the center. I really like this. You have the base color and then you have the things on either side of it. Help you with analogous. Triadic. This is where they're evenly spaced across the color wheel, the standard color wheel. So here's the primary colors. We get red. This one is a little bit interesting because this is what I see as red, but evidently that's more of a rust or an orange. And so you will see it's a little bit different. I think this is based on a color wheel for printing. So the primary colors for printing are a little bit different than what I'm used to with regular pigment. And then tetradic, which is 4 colors evenly spaced. And then another one is achromatic, where it's, shades of gray, like black, white, and shades of gray. Now, these two things are really important. Both your senses walk, where you pay attention to textures and do it outside and inside, and also the color wheel. I want you to play with both of those, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to pick 3 of the color combinations you see in there. And the color combinations are different things like the color combination options are the things like complementary, monochromatic, triadic, uh, achromatic, tetradic. Those are the color combinations I'm talking about, the structure of the color combinations. And for each of you're going to pick 3 of those that you like. And then for each of those 3, you're going to be picking different base colors. So if we go back to this color wheel, let's say the 3 that I pick, the 3 color combinations are, I'll use complementary for one of them. I'm going to use monochromatic for one. Well, no, that's too boring. I'm going to use analogous for one of them, and then I'm going to use tetradic for one of them. So for the complementary one, my 2 base colors, I'm going to use a red, a rust red, and so this complementary, and another one is blue, and those are going to be my 2 color sets for complementary. And if I'm going to do analogous, maybe one of my base colors is going to be green. And so these are the analogous colors I'm going to work with. Another one is going to be purple. And these are the analogous colors. Now, if I'm going to use tetradic, maybe one of the ones is going to be blue. And then I'll have these other 3 colors. And another one is going to be yellow. As close to yellow as I can get on this color wheel. And then I'm going to have these other 3 colors. So that gives me 6 different versions, where I pick 2 for complementary, 2 for analogous, and 2 for tetradic. Two sets of colors for each of those color combinations or color schemes. Now, why am I doing that for 3 different ones? 2 sets of colors for each of 3 different color combinations, because I'm going to be making 6 tiles of colors and 6 tiles of textures. And the 6 tiles of colors are going to be, I describe how to do that. I'm not using 6 different versions of the same color schema. I have 3 different color schemas that I'm using. In that example, it was analogous, it was complementary, and it was tetradic, are the 3 different color schemas. And then for each of those color schemas, I'm going to be doing 2 sets of colors. And that gives me 6 different combinations. And we'll talk about that in just a second. For the texture, I need to do 6 different texture tiles. So in my senses journey, I'm going to be thinking about the different textures that are around me. And I want to show you some examples of how people have done this. Now, we used to all do this in cardboard, where you have to do a lot of different tiles of different textures using just cardboard. But I want you to be thinking about the plants that you see, the things that you find when you're walking around inside the house and elsewhere. And you have an option. If you want, you can leave it the natural color, or you can spray paint it all a solid color. And the reason why the pictures look like this is because the person has set up their texture cube. So I'm seeing one corner so I can see three different textures, taking a photo like that. And then they've shown the opposite corner to me, taking another photo, so I can see all six of their texture tiles. And they're doing the same thing with the colors. Right, one corner pointed to me, so I can see three of the color tiles. The opposite corner pointed to me, so I can see three more of the color tiles. That way you don't have to take 12 photos. You can take 2 photos as long as you remember to rotate the cube all the way around. Now I want to show you some really good examples, and I think that after we talk and get into this next week and look at them, I'm going to switch these out so that they're all good examples because I do have some bad examples here, and I want to demonstrate what those are. Now I'm going to start with good examples. Now this person did a really beautiful job with their textures, and they chose to spray paint their cube and their texture cube entirely white. This really, I think, helps to highlight the textures that they did. And look at, for this, they used a lot of magazine colors or magazine pages. We talked last week about, where you can go and get free images to cut up. You can design guides at like Hobby Lobby. Sometimes you can get free design guide pages that before you cut them up or take them out of the store, make sure and ask. But you can also find design guides at paint stores. They'll have some really good ones. Paint chips are a good source as well if you want to grab some of those. I would recommend going to 3 or 4 different paint stores: Walmart, Ace, Home Depot, uh, and Lowe's are all good ones to go to. Go to their paint thing and just get a couple from each one. Don't overload them. Sometimes you can find old magazines at like DI or something like that too to tear up. But with the textures, you're exploring different textures and you're covering the tile with the textures. Don't just like this one, don't just glue down a couple strands of grass. That doesn't count as a texture. Notice that the entire tile is covered with the texture. And for the collages, you're going to have to make collages that have a minimum of 9 pieces. And this one is more of a, I wanted to look at the color schemes too. Like this one is, both of these are split complementary, it looks like almost, or triadic almost, because they have 3 different colors in them. This one, it looks like it's almost not quite monochromatic. Maybe it's more analogous. Maybe it is monochromatic. They just have different versions of red. So they're not staying exact, but you can see how they're really paying attention to the color. And if we go and look at the other thing, each of these collage faces have at least 9 pieces that they've glued down. Right here, you can't see it, but they used a lot of really small ones right along here. So they have 2 main, there's 2 pieces right here, and then about 5 different pieces that they cut up right along here. Here, it's easy to see that how many different pieces that they have, but each of them, they're playing with these ideas. Like this is analogous with reds. This is kind of a green and pink going on, and this is um, kind of green, pink, and blue going on. So 3 different colors there. So the colors, they weren't really, really tight with staying true to the color schemas that they picked, but um, they did a really good job, I think, playing around with the color. And here they almost made a sculptural wall with the textures. Did some interesting things here. This is interesting as well. And here, this is an example where they did a really good job with the texture, maybe not so much with the color. Because the texture, look at how intense those textures are. Everything is covered with the texture. That looks really good. Right here, there's a lot of empty space right here, which is not as good. Maybe the texture here was these squiggles. If this is yours, I would say use about 5 times as many squiggles so the whole thing is covered with them. But here you can see they really covered the entire surface with the texture. Some of these textures are going to take less time. Some are going to be taking more time. Like this texture with crinkled paper, maybe not so much time. But this spiral, a lot more time. And in the description, I say average about 45 minutes per tile. That's the average that you want to put into it. So if you think you're done and you've wrapped it with saran wrap and it only took you 7 seconds, think again, go back over, add more texture. If you want to wrap it with saran wrap, instead of leaving just one layer, put 20 layers of saran wrap on it. See what that does. That will start looking really interesting. Maybe in between each layer, you zap it with a blow dryer to kind of melt some of it. That can look like a really fascinating texture. Or do layers of hot glue where you do little strings or dots or build up the dots. If you're going to do pins, put so many pins on it, there's no space in between the pins. Okay, so you want to really texture these up quite a bit. Notice they're not supposed to be their own sculptures. They are exercises in texture. Now for the color, remember that each of these are supposed to be collages with a minimum of 9 separate pieces per collage. So this person was downgraded because you have one background piece of red and 3 pieces of other colored dot. This was tetratic, which is good, but they were downgraded because they didn't have the minimum of 9 pieces for this collage face. Here, that's only 3 pieces. Here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. So yeah, it's interesting explorations of color, but even if you're doing felt, cut out a bunch of triangles and build the image up with a bunch of little triangles or a bunch of little squares. Um, you know, we we're asking for 9 pieces in a collage specifically because I've had people turn in stuff with, 3 or 4 pieces before. And that's not really a collage. That is making a design out of the felt, but it's not really a collage. This top piece is a little bit better, but there's 3 pieces here, 5 pieces here. So, collages need to have 9 pieces each. Now here, this person did kind of an interesting one. They did do the minimum number of pieces in their collages, but the textures aren't really there. Now, if you're going to be doing something like this, I would say instead of just putting a couple strands on, weave the whole thing with strands of grass. So you have the whole thing woven. That would be really interesting. Cover, if these are little wrinkled pieces of dirt or whatever, cover it with glue in different strips or in different patches. And before the glue hardens, sprinkle in different colors of dirt. So you have that kind of dirt texture. Spend some time on it. Cover the entire surface with your texture. So again, you can see how they cut up little squares and stuff like that and build it up. These are pretty decent collages. This one only has a couple different pieces of paper, so I'm not so happy about this one. And they were downgraded for that. This one, not a lot of pieces. We look over here. This one, only 3 pieces, downgraded for that. This, lots of little triangles. This is looking pretty good. But this texture kind of bothers me. If you're going to make a texture out of leaves like this, I would say split the leaves down the center vein and glue them, starting right here, glue them so they overlap like shingles and cover the entire tile with your texture. Like this is what this person did. Now, this is a good collage, only 3 pieces, not so much. Look at this texture. Lots of stones. That's really interesting. They made it like a mosaic out of smashed up shells. That's really interesting. Here, lots of twigs. That's interesting. Here, lots and lots of thumbtacks. Very cool. But I'm not so happy about this, and I'm not so happy about this. If you're going to use aluminum foil, crinkle it up. Use the foil has a duller side and a shinier side. Crinkle it up, maybe glue some strings down, maybe do some hot glue on the cardboard before you put the um, foil on, and then put some Elmer's glue, paint some Elmer's glue over the texture you put on the cardboard tile, and really press the foil down on it so you get the texture coming through. That would make it very interesting. And maybe put a band where you show the other side of the foil. This is just a sheet of sandpaper. That's not much of a texture. But how cool would it be if you used 3 different grits of sandpaper, maybe even sandpaper from when they sanded down their foam sculpture, and made a collage with it? And you don't have to go into the same intensity of collage with this. Maybe the texture is taking three different grits of sandpaper and doing a herringbone weave or something like that. That would be really fascinating. And that would be an incredible texture. Remember, these are supposed to be about 45 minutes per side. I can believe they spent a lot of time getting all those thumbtacks in. This didn't take much time. This didn't take much time. Think about cool textures and stuff. Here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of paper. If you're going to do strips like this, it can be really interesting, but you get 9 pieces of paper for the collage. And it might even be more interesting where you cut them into triangles and squares and do mosaics for the strips. Here we have 3, 6, 7 pieces of paper, not quite there. This, if you're going to do weaving with the different colors, then maybe even weave it with smaller pieces so that the little squares in between are tinier. And then so you get more pieces for your collage in. And here it's just 1, 2, 3 pieces. So again, not so much for the collage. So this has good and bad examples. And this is one of the reasons why I'm going through this with you to explain what we are looking for, texture-wise and collage-wise. Now, I do want to show you a submission, and there are some good things about it, and it's some things that I think that it would be nice to see added to. Here, person straight primary colors. Technically, this does fit the minimum number for the collage. There's 9 pieces, and yes, this is described in the assignment parameters. But this, not so much. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. And here, it looks like it's just 5 pieces. So I would recommend, if this person wanted full points for the color, this face is going to be okay. This one, I would recommend maybe getting another paint sample that is just a little bit different green and maybe cut a bunch of squares and put those down the center of those green stripes. That would be interesting. Maybe do something where you have the leftovers of these 3 colors, cut really thin strips, and for each of these color ones, put a thin strip of each of the other 2 colors. So you have a green and a purple strip on this orange one, an orange and a purple, narrow strip on this green one, and orange and green on this purple, like that. That could make it really interesting and would also help with the time. And on this with the leaves, I think these are really interesting, but I don't believe that this took 45 minutes to do because there's not an awful lot going on. There's only like 4 leaves. If you're going to do something like this, I would say look at it from your arc point of view. And maybe on this one, maybe get a bunch of smaller leaves and put around the rim there, glue the larger leaf on top, and then put smaller leaves around the rim to cover up the rest of the cardboard and even trim it with a pair of scissors. On this, maybe it would be really interesting to split the leaves in half and make it look like fish scales. This almost looks like fish scales like this. I would say get twice as many leaves and start on one side and just cover the entire tile with the leaves, overlapping them like this. That would really build up a very cool texture. And you could do it where you start um, right here, where you have the pointy area of the leaf going off the edge. Maybe glue the leaves down so that they're right over the edge so you don't see any cardboard. Do the next layer doing the same thing on that and doing the same thing. And after a while, it's going to look like fish scales. Again, it's going to look, but it'll look really cool with all the different overlapping leaves. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for with this assignment. So what's disappointing is, all of you guys are professional artists, but what has been disappointing over the years is I've seen people who start doing something really fascinating and then they just give up, they get bored, and they go to something else and they don't follow through. All of you guys do exceptional work. So please, I want to replace all these images with your guys' works. So spend some time on the textures, spend some time on the colors, think through the colors, use your expertise. We're not painting, we're making collages with both the textures and the colors. So think about that. And if you guys need any clarification or any help from me or any further direction, let me know. I am more than happy to talk to you. Just email me and we can have even a conversation over a video call. So I hope that this all makes a lot more sense. I love what you guys are doing with the PowerPoints. They are looking terrific. And I'm absolutely certain that you're going to knock it out of the park with the tiles and colors. So we're going to look at those next week. And we are also going to be talking quite a bit about the conceptual work, the contemporary processes. And I will show you some examples from previous classes as well to get you in the frame of mind for that. So what I'm seeing from you guys is looking really good. When I make notes and stuff, look at the notes. And if you want the full points, make the changes and resubmit. And I'm more than happy to regrade. Well, I hope you guys stay safe over the 4th of July weekend. Enjoy yourselves, enjoy the weekend, and I look forward to seeing everybody next Wednesday. Thank you for so much for watching through this, and I I'm gonna, like I said, by the weekend I'll have everything graded. And if you see that I'm grading something, if you resubmitted and I haven't graded it within a day or two, please drop an email, let me know, remind me so I can take care of it quickly for you. All right. Thank you so much, and I will look forward to seeing you guys next week.